This is Governor Ron DeSantis in what looks like a superhero stance earlier this month alongside state wildlife officials at the ready to hunt down Burmese pythons, a non-native species that has invaded the Florida Everglades and competes with native reptiles, birds and mammals for food. But don't worry, Floridians, Ron DeSantis is on the job, ready to protect you from any danger that has the audacity to invade the Sunshine State, including apparently not just massive reptiles, but also any ideas with which he does not agree. The current 2024 GOP presidential frontrunner has signed a new law set to go into effect next week that would punish student indoctrination, quote unquote, at public universities. Teachers and students will be surveyed, not the verb I would have chosen, about their beliefs to determine the state of so-called intellectual diversity on campuses. And any school deemed not in compliance could face budget cuts. It sounds like something straight out of Stasi East Germany or George Orwell, like Florida's version of the thought police. Oh, and what happened to the party of free speech, of the right to offend? Now banning stuff they don't want to hear? For more than half a century now, Republicans have been absolutely terrified of what students are learning on college campuses, seeing higher ed as hotbeds of Marxism and communism, radicalizing the next generation with America's young men and women simply powerless to resist the ideas they are being taught. It's total BS, yet these days it seems it's also the kind of thing that might send parents into a frenzy at a local school board meeting.
After repeated warnings against audience outbursts, the board voted to end the comments session, and the room descended into chaos. Loudoun County Sheriff's deputies declared an unlawful assembly. At least one person was physically removed from the room by deputies. News 4 saw this man being held in custody outside the building. Virginia state troopers arrived as backup.
Some of the parents at that Loudoun County School Board meeting in Northern Virginia last night, they came to protest a policy that would require teachers to address students by their preferred pronouns, while others were there to protest critical race theory, the law school level scholarly framework which argues in part that white supremacy is encoded into the very fabric of American law, a theory that the superintendent of the Loudoun County School District says is not being taught to school students. But once again, the facts don't seem to matter. The fear has taken hold, fear that's being spread by astroturfing groups that are infiltrating local school board meetings and being amplified by professional political operatives who are not the mere everyday American parents they are portrayed as on conservative media shows. But make no mistake, that fear of theirs is real. The chaos they're creating is palpable. And that's the point. It's kicked off a culture war that is based not so much in NIMBYism, not in my backyard, but not in my kid's classroom. Because when it comes to educating the next generation to take accountability for the past and responsibility for the future, well, many parents are loudly screaming, nope, don't hang that on my little Skylar or Jaden. So what's worse? That the modern Republican Party does not want to talk about racism or the racist history of this country to the point where their supporters are willing to get arrested at school board meetings? Or that they're willing to use the power of the state to make sure no one else does either? For more, let's turn to activist and host of the podcast Undistracted, Brittany Packnett-Cunningham. Also with us, Molly Jong-Fast, editor-at-large for The Daily Beast. Thank you both for coming on tonight. Brittany, let me start with you. You have Republicans so dead against dealing with any aspects of our racist past or present that these people who rail against the state are at the same time willing to use state power to ban certain discussions on campus or in schools, make sure everyone signs up to an ideological diversity survey, which surely isn't even constitutional.
I mean, the hypocrisy that you point out of this party is a feature. It's not a bug. We have to remember that every single thing that is happening here is about preserving the power of white supremacy culture, which means that your values actually don't matter. they are temporary. You only call on them when they work for you, and when you have to throw them out of the window and use something else, you do that. So we see the free speech party trying to trounce free speech. We see the anti-state party using the vestiges of the state and the levers of the state to try to maintain the status quo and try to support their own power. I was a third grade teacher.
Yes.
At no point was I asked to teach critical race theory. Did I think I should teach critical race theory? This is a theory and a framework that is leveraged only when you are in law school, usually in a particular specialty field and an elective, right? So the idea that critical race theory is being taught is a bold-faced lie. What we're actually witnessing is a bunch of people who do not want real history being taught. And that should worry all of us, because if the history is what frightens you, it's because you know what's in it.
I mean, they don't have a problem with the critical or the theory. It's the race part they have a problem with. Molly, today at a House Defense Budget hearing on Capitol Hill, after Matt Gaetz tried to explain to Defense Secretary Austin, a retired four-star general, how critical race theory was negatively impacting the U.S. military, this was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley's response. Have a listen to some of it.
I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there.
Molly, you have a top general explaining why it isn't a bad thing to study our past or to study other people's beliefs. And you have Matt Gaetz there shaking his head. Republicans, and especially Florida Republicans like Gaetz and DeSantis, are trying to start this new culture war, but the actual warriors are not playing along.
Well, they're sort of legislating for Fox News, right? Like all these bills are sort of made so that they'll work well on Tucker Carlson. And they're not really about anything.
Yes.
And in fact, DeSantis's bills, they're very nebulous. None of these people even know what critical race theory is. They just want to prevent, the idea here is that these children are so fragile that if they learn the true racist history of America, they will somehow be damaged, right? And we all know that's ridiculous. But this is also just about like getting on TV, and, Ron DeSantis being able to say to Fox News, like, look, we are fighting against woke culture. And it's these sort of cheap culture wars that they know they can win because they know that the legislation and the stuff that the Republican Party is doing isn't very popular. And so this kind of racism they feel like is their last best hope.
It's so true it's all about getting on TV. And I mentioned earlier how a lot of these guests on Fox are actually Republican operatives. They're not being honest with their audience. You'll be shocked. So imagine if I'd introduced you both tonight as a kind of Little League coach, Molly Jong-Fast, and concerned parent, Brittany Packnett-Cunningham. Just bizarre. That is what they're doing over on Fox to try and astroturf this. Brittany, if you were a parent in Florida who has saved and scraped to send your child to university, a public university, who does want your child to learn about whatever they want to learn about, who does not want Ron DeSantis setting the curriculum, what options do you have right now? What does the activist in you suggest should be done in response to this wave of new laws and policies from the GOP?
Well, the activist in me says that I should be aligning myself with other folks who know that this is not just key to our children's future, but key to the future of democracy. That we actually all benefit from a well-educated populace that does understand the difference between what we're seeing Republicans talk about and the truth that actually should be being taught in our classrooms. So I'd be getting with organizations, organizers, other parents, other community members who are concerned not just about our present, but about our future, who understand this to be the power play that it is, and who understand that at the end of the day, we all lose from these culture wars, that this is kind of the evidence of the last gasps of white supremacy and patriarchy. So we have to know that it is going to fight very, very hard to the death, and we have to be willing and ready to be in it for the long haul, make sure that our voices are heard, and make sure that folks know that there are more of us than there are of the folks we see screaming in those halls.
Very good point. Molly, for a long time, the coronavirus and the whole personal freedom debate around mask wearing and vaccine, that was the new culture war on the right. Now it's critical race theory, which strips teachers and students of their freedom, which is ironic, quite a disconnect. You get personal freedom on what we tell you can get personal freedom on. Where do they go next? I mean, it seems like the Republican Party very clearly have no policies, have nothing to say about the economy, infrastructure, boring. It's culture war, culture war, culture war, how to get on Tucker, as you put it, every night.
Yeah, I can see them going back. They were very into the border. Remember, people were coming to the border and there was going to be, so I could see them coming back to that for the midterm. They did that 2 midterms ago, where they said they were going to come and get you through the border. It's all about fear, right? So right now last summer it was Antifa burning down cities, and it's these sort of vivid imagery that they can get on television, but it's not real stuff. Because if you said to people, we want to lower corporate taxes and give really rich people tax cuts, and that's our platform, and Arctic drilling, right? That's not so popular. And so this is this way to get this kind of older generation that watches television is really scared of a multiracial democracy. And so I think what Brittany says is totally right, that this is this last gasp. But they still could control it. And the way the Senate and the House is, and with the redistricting, I mean, Democrats could lose the House just on this gerrymandering. So it's pretty scary.
Molly, do you think that it will work? Do you think it'll actually, because I worry, some people are like, Republicans are so silly, they're not focusing on what Biden's doing. But actually, could this work? Get their base turned out for the midterms, get them riled up for this stuff.
They are geniuses at messaging. And you see it again and again. And it's funny because I had this really brilliant senator on the podcast, and I said to him, look, these Republicans have these like brilliant messages that scare people and get them excited, and they have phrases. And, build a wall was one of the stupidest things I had ever heard, but people loved it. They wore T-shirts, they chanted, it worked, right? I mean, nobody was ever going to build a wall with Mexico. Like, it was ridiculous. And so they can speak to their voters in a way that Democrats can't. And yes, I'm terrified, because I do think that Democrats continue to think that the good guys will win. And that's not how it works.
You're right about the messaging. I mean, build a wall, ban Muslims, and poor old Hillary Clinton 2016 was explaining how she would fund her childcare policies, while Trump just said, I'll ban Muslims and Mexicans. They are unfortunate evil geniuses when it comes to that messaging. We'll have to leave it there. Brittany Packnett-Cunningham and Molly Jong-Fast, thank you both so much for your time tonight. Hi, I'm Mehdi Hasan. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more of The Mehdi Hasan Show by clicking on any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thank you for watching.